Hello, art and architecture enthusiasts. Welcome to a recording and presentation of the visionary architect Eugene Ray and Professor Emeritus of the Environmental Design Program at San Diego State University from 1969 to 1996. This special presentation was recorded on October 26, 2021, on the occasion of Professor Ray's 89th birthday. In attendance were several longtime friends and former students. This short presentation is a brief overview of Professor Ray's visionary design for a museum of radiant architecture dedicated to the study of not only his own work over a 50-year time span, but the investigation and implementation of architectural forms that resonate with the human body and spirit. Links to more information about Eugene Ray will appear at the end of this video. And now, Professor Ray.
I want to thank everyone who came today, our wonderful alumni from SDSU, so many who aided me in the years past, and I have the fortune that Professor Kotaro Nakamura has built a beautiful model and made renderings of this Radiant Architecture Museum that has inspired me. The idea inspired me to make this design, and all of the parts of this project are based on biotronic energy. That is, each volume is either spherical or conical in nature and has a very expansive bioenergy property about it. I think this is probably the first modern building ever conceived with that idea. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe there's somebody in Europe doing something like this. I have certainly spoken to many audiences in Europe, and I know that a lot of younger people are working in this area. I'm sure many of you remember that I had the fortune of being invited into the French government's Architecture and Energy Committee, and I wrote several articles that were published in France devoted to that idea of biotronic energy and volumes, and they actually published this. Now, Kotaro Nakamura, as you can see, one of our former graduate students and head of the art department at the end of his teaching career, was kind enough to not only build this model and make the renderings, but also design and have published, printed, the posters, which we see a copy of here. It's certainly the grandest expression of my work in a poster, and I'm very grateful for that. And I thank David Phobes, Professor David Phobes, who put this presentation together today, selecting the appropriate images. And as we can see here, spherical and conical volumes in previous prototypes of mine, going back to the very first days. The one on the right, the dome was made probably about 1971 or 72, with economy housing being in mind. And at that time, less than 5% of the people could afford to build a house. Today, it's less than 1% of the people can afford to build houses. So domes were and still are important. We know that the SpaceX and other projects to Mars are very much incorporating domes. They are very strong structures, physically resisting earthquakes and hurricanes, and they also have great internal volumes. On the left, I took that idea further into the universal spheroid, the openable sphere using Armstrong Teflon in two skins one translucent, one opaque. And I carried that idea into a hotel competition project in Japan, actually in Hong Kong, and Kotaro's partner and one of our former graduate students, Chikako Terada, helped me on that project. We'll go on to the next slide. Now, early on in housing and spherical volumes, I think that idea alone is extremely vital in this whole presentation, is if there is a volume that's overlooked in architecture, because it is difficult to develop a volume, a spherical volume into usable architectural space. This has largely been ignored, but that's unfortunate because spheres are the most powerful biotronic energy volume. You can take a Kirlian photograph, you can measure the volume in terms of energy in several ways. So this drawing goes back to the early 70s on a slope. The plan view, one of the key aspects of designing for volumes that are spherical is to not run walls into the outer wall, to try to keep the internal walls separate. A frontal view showing the openable space on the slope. And then I carried that idea further into the houseboat that you can see here. I haven't seen that rendering in a long time. It's really good that Dave has been able to have some of the images that have escaped me. It is hard to keep track with all of the graphics. And then seeing the three together, the one on the right was the final exploration we made in terms of a structural skin other than geodesic in nature. The openable spheroid is very appealing because the translucent skin is very good for projections. As we know in the Omnimax Theater in Balboa Park, which I remember when they built it, it was the first Omnimax Theater. And images are very powerful in there, seen in various points in the volume. And then I did economy houses, beach housing, camping structures that were economy-minded and also openable. Some young people came to me one day when I was teaching at SDSU, and they were wanting to develop a kind of entertainment space on El Cajon Boulevard using fiber optics and using projections, software, and so on. This went back to the 1970s. I made several studies in 1972 for spherical volumes. And then we even had a promise from, I'm trying to think, I think it was the Lutheran Center on SDSU campus, who wanted to have a dome on a slope site. We found a slope site on the campus that was really kind of leftover space, and created this collage, as you can see in the upper image, in the dome. And affordable houses in domes elsewhere, the other three images. I was very impressed with the Sadhu culture in India. very spiritually oriented people of wisdom who put together their own houses along the beaches in India. And I tried to use that as a reference point in very low-cost housing. The Japanese history of cultural history, living on low platform spaces with the storage underneath in their traditional houses, was something I felt very warmly about. And it's certainly a big difference from our culture of heavy furniture and expensive supporting facilities. But I do believe that younger people, especially, are able to take on an environment of that sort. I had a student who actually went up to Ananda, which is an alternative community in northeastern California, and built one of my designs. I don't know if we have it here. It's the one that their garden surrounding the dome for raising food plants, which is an idea that I like very much. The lower right slide with the floor illuminated interested me and was one of the concepts behind the Radiant Architecture Museum, where at the midpoint of the sphere, the major floor would be that could be lighted. There are ways to do that. Now, in 1982, I was attracted to a competition for longer life, a house for longer life, chateau, and having a tradition in my family of plantations, agricultural plantations for food plants, appealed to me to create a prototype where 3 generations of a family could be together with solar and wind energy supporting life. And this was my solution. I made a book of the drawings. So this is just one page, but here you can see the master plan and an overview and an elevation. Each family unit would have their own separate volume, but they would share the dining and kitchen facilities. And then I had a friend, Ron Schaefer was his name, who was a mathematician, and he would come visit my classroom. And one day I asked him if he would make a diagram for me of an ideal footprint for a health resort, spa, which he did. And this design is based on that. Water and heat are 2 experiences here. So the conoids, each conoid that you see is a water and heat spa facility. And the tower is an energy tower for the volume. I've been trying to locate Ron Schaefer, incidentally, if any of you ever run across him. He was a brilliant man. And when I retired, I lost track of him. And I've tried many times to track him down, but I've not been successful. He was very, very smart, and we had very warm association. The idea of a spa in Europe intrigues me, and also in Asia. And my thought is residents should be conceived with a spa facility in mind. In this case, what looks like a traditional French dwelling with the conical roof is actually a very modern adaptation of that ancient idea. And in this case, the sleeping zone is in the sphere within the cone. So this is kind of a double strength design. And the sphere is an openable sphere. The idea of the prototype is important to me. When I started teaching at LSU in the mid-60s, I had two of my students win awards for that idea of designing houses and spa facilities in a prototypical manner where production was the ultimate goal, and of course economy coming with that plan. This is one of my favorite modern designs. This one is from 1991, which is in the last 5 years of my teaching at SDSU. Now, Kotaro here today was my major help on this project. We received a commission. One day a gentleman came to my classroom who had invented a movable sidewalk, and he wanted to develop a shopping center halfway between Los Angeles and San Diego, kind of a super shopping center. And I told him, well, the movable sidewalk would work well in a large circle. He liked the idea, and that's what we're seeing here. He never was able to raise the money to build this prototype shopping center. So later I worked it into a scheme for a modern architecture and UFO synergetic center out in the desert. And we see the sketch for that and the graphic on the right for that, which is a cutout. Actually, it looks like a model, but it's really a cutout. And Kotaro, who was aiding me, made some very beautiful sections right above that, as you can see. I believe that this center devoted to UFO research as a museum in the desert in California would attract people from all over the world. There's a huge interest in this, which is expanding. The UFO sightings are at a great volume right now, all over the world. And people come to California with a lot of history here in this state of that whole study. And I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to know many of the researchers. I go to the conferences regularly. Now, this is one of the best sections of that concept, and Kotaro made this drawing for me, and it's really a beautiful drawing, and it does incorporate both the volume of the sphere and the cone, which gives it a double strength. And in this case, the sphere is a theater in the center of the concept. Parking is around the outside. That's my original sketch for that. Desert Incidents, I call this prototype, based on all of the amazing UFO incidents in the history of California. I have a friend who wrote a book about that. And you know, on the internet, you can read a lot about other visualizations of that idea. Now, Richard Zia made this visualization of the concept for a radiant architecture museum in the desert. And this was seen in animation in the exhibition that Dave curated, and as for SDSU of my work in radiant architecture. Richard has done some really nice work of this sort. Now, Joe Cardell helped me on this project. After the Notre Dame Cathedral fire, the disaster there, the burning of the spire, it came to me, well, a cone, a glazed cone, would be a marvelous solution to replace the old wooden spire. And Joe did this really nice visualization of that idea based on my design. some more views of that. The French government has been reluctant. I had hoped they would have a competition, but the people who have the money in France want the existing design, the old Notre Dame Cathedral, to be rebuilt as it was, which is a horrendous task. They are working on it, and God only knows when it will be finished, if ever. But I tried very hard to have the French government take an interest in this solution. I used I.M. Pei's Louvre design as an example of how a lightweight tensile structure could work with the historical traditional fabric of the city and revitalize Paris. And I think it's tragic that the French government wouldn't make an effort. Somehow I.M. Pei convinced the Louvre Museum to adopt a tensegrity structure in the courtyard at the Louvre, and it has worked very well. Well, there is the marvelous perspective rendering of the Radiant Architecture Museum as I envisioned it, with 3 spheres. These are not just domes, they're spheres, spherical volumes. The one closest to us, the 2 in the back, one's green, one's blue. The blue one on the right would be alumni, a museum. And the one closest to green one would be my work. And the entrance is in the middle, and it's a spherical tetrahedron based on the invention of a French-German engineer by the name of Rillieux. And I think it would be a great entrance to this museum. The 2 towers, of course, are energy towers. I always like to refer to Tesla's genius at coming up with that idea of developing energy towers. He used it in New York, the concept for transporting structures that look very much like the cigar-shaped UFO I saw when I was 15 years old in 1947. As you can see, the model that Cottereau built, photographed carefully as it is, with the openable unisphere in the foreground, which in this case can be used for entertainment and for lectures with the audience on the outside, would work quite well. And so much of the concept, the volume, is below and protected from the elements. The small red capsule in the back is a viewing capsule toward a huge sculpture called the Electric Wisdom Machine that I designed right after I arrived in California. I think many of you may remember that concept. And my vision of it would be in the trees, at a little distant from the Radiant Architecture Museum. Now, this is the early drawing or concept visualization that Cottereau put together. Very nice graphic. and another early one on the upper left. And then Kotaro put two other graphics together from a lower perspective view that I think together with the overview one developed quite a nice three-dimensional feeling. Now the parts made with the printing method, as we were discussing earlier, are very impressive. I asked Kotaro for some scaled figures, and we see them there. It gives you an idea how large the spheroids are. They're 65 feet in diameter, and although you may not think that is a big volume, it really is. Because when I first developed the unisphere, or universal spheroid, I studied that very carefully. A volume that's 65 feet in diameter, spheroid, is a huge space. So remembering this isn't just a dome, but it's a sphere, would mean that my archive and the alumni archive would both have a very sizable volume to work with. And there are ways to work in the volume to make it function quite well. It's really impressive to see the parts there. Kotaro was telling me this is the most difficult part of his effort, was creating these towers. And I can imagine such a refined element as that is, and we can see it on the table there for us to realize how small that is impressive and amazing, really, that he was able to put that together. Which he did in his own house, as I understand. Kotaro was telling me that in his office today, people work at home. So, do you have more than one machine to do this?
Well, we have two at my office in downtown. I bought this one for my home, and we bought two for the schools, so the students can use.
How much do these machines cost?
This one was about $600.
Well, that's not too bad.
No.
When you can see what it is capable of doing, yeah, which is so impressive. I think in the technology of architectural offices, this is the greatest advancement I can remember. The print the models. And now we know there are people who are building the structures in the same methodology by printing. And there is the poster, which I'm truly impressed and gratified and grateful for. I've had a lot of posters made in our classes over the years for speakers, guest speakers, and various expositions and exhibitions we've had. But this is at the top of the heap. I'm so very grateful for that. What printer did you use to have this done?
Well, first I was thinking about using Vistaprint, which is a distance, not in San Diego, but it became too late. So I had to find somebody who can print in time.
Yeah, yeah. So in San Diego.
In La Mesa,
in La Mesa, you found somebody.
So
wow.
I just asked.
They did a great job too.
Yeah, they did. They did.
Well, I'm very honored by that and grateful, Kotaro. And it's going to be fun to show this in my Facebook page. And I'm grateful for all of you came here today and and each of you can have a copy.
You can have the model if you like.
Well, thank you.
It's your birthday cake.
It really is the best tasting birthday cake I've ever had.
I have to say, Philip helped me with the cover. I have tendency to make everything dark. And he told me, no, it's too dark. He painted it for me.
Well, it did have a lot of mystery. I did like that. I liked it over the blue one. You know, you had another version with a blue around it, surround.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the mystery of this is very good. I like that. Now, if you have any questions, I'm delighted to respond to that. First off, I want to thank Dave for putting this together.
Yeah.
You did a great job. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm really happy you want to put it on YouTube. It's amazing what you can see on YouTube today.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
Pretty much anything.
Well, every book, you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
so we'll eventually link this to the library.
Oh, great.
And,
Yeah.
with your, the oral history that's already there.
Yeah.
And, so making it a link makes it, you know, easy
Oh,
for everyone to
absolutely.
access.
Well, thank you so much again. And any questions? You know, I apologize that at my age, I don't do a very good job talking about this, but
What?
Maybe
We were
you-
right back in the classroom, Gene.
I felt it was
Yeah,
spectacular.
absolutely.
I was thinking how spectacular it was. What are you talking about?
well, thank you so much.
How many units do we get for a?
It was excellent, Judy.
Yeah. So while we have you on tape,
Yes.
if you can briefly just give us a definition or explanation of biotronic energy.
Yeah, sure.
That was exactly what I was gonna ask.
Well, the key word is biological, right? So biotronic really does relate to the idea that nature has energy. Everything is a form of energy. And vibrations are at the heart of it. People use that term, good vibes, bad vibes. They're not far off the mark. Some spaces feel better, and it has a lot to do with the shape of the space and the materials. There are several books one could read that would help you in this way, and I try to provide that in my Facebook and also on the blog. The electric quality of living creatures and of volumes interface. And so biotronic energy is electromagnetic energy. That is the basic concept. You can look it up. There's a lot of literature. There's a lot on the internet. There are books. I discovered it when I arrived in California with a book called Pyramid Power. And the man who wrote that book was a genius. He was a child prodigy. He was published in Life magazine when he was about 14 years old or younger. He had invented a hearing device for children, deaf children. And he was truly, a genius. In this book of his, I would recommend. It's available, it's very reasonable, and there are a lot of others now that have come after that. David Hatcher Childress, who you see maybe on the program Ancient Aliens, has written a book that is even more expansive on the subject. And the Russian scientists have built test pyramids at various heights and sizes. They've gone through a long process of studying biotronic energy. You can find it on the internet. The Russians wrote a book called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain that is involved with this kind of energy. And it's fascinating once you get into it. And, you know, it's a shame architects know so little about this. They don't get into the physics and the natural technology that's available with study. At LSU and Tulane, where I studied, there was virtually nothing of that. I had to discover this for myself. And it's fascinating once you get into it. Nature is our best guide, I used to always say. And also, I will tell you this, another quote you can remember from me. If you go back in history long enough, you will find the future.
Yeah.
Some of you may not realize that Nancy's husband at that time, Roger I, was also a student of mine, and they were in my early classes and very involved in our Earth Day exhibitions. We had a lot of that activity. And interestingly, Earth Day started the year I started teaching at SDSU. Also, that was about the time the Whole Earth Catalog got started. And talk about synchronicity, that's really amazing. I didn't quite realize it at the time, but Buckminster Fuller did become a friend of mine, and we held his last exhibition and conference about 2 years before I retired. And that was a marvelous experience and very meaningful to me. The Whole Earth Catalog was like a Bible in my classes at one time, and a truly powerful and meaningful resource.
I still have my copy.
I'm sorry. I gave Dave my copy, one of the last ones, the big comprehensive one, but I still have my 1969 Whole Earth Catalog
There you
copy. And that will go in my archive wherever that's going to be, wherever it's going to go. Thanks to Dave again today for making this wonderful presentation of my renderings. I'm so grateful for that, Dave. Thank you all for being here today, and if there's any other question, I'm happy to respond.
Well, I'd like to say, if we didn't make it clear, happy birthday.
The best birthday I could ever hope to have, believe me.